Hello, Raisha, my love. My voice and my face are here once again to share with you a love story. The story, as you know, of Beren and Lúthien. When we last left off, the case is that Celegorm and Curufin, the sons of Feanor, were banished from Nargothrond because of their cowardice in not taking more direct action against Morgoth, and in a lot of ways trying to supplant Finrod Felagund, who has passed. They encountered Beren and Lúthien on the road, who were going to regroup before attempting to collect the Silmarils again, and they tried to kidnap Lúthien. Beren and Huan and Lúthien together were able to protect themselves, as well as stealing Curufin's horse, though Beren was shot in the chest and has been receiving medical treatment from Lúthien since, within the borders of Doriath. Beren recovered, and, very explicitly against the wishes of Lúthien, went on to recover the Silmarils by himself, although he only needs one to fulfill his to fulfill the bride price, I suppose. While Lúthien is back with Huan. Before entering in to what is very much so Morgoth's territory, past the smoky mountains of the Thangorodrim, he has created this prayer and blessing in honor of Lúthien in the Light of the Stars, called the Song of Parting, and I shall sing it to you quietly like this as we proceed with page 15. Farewell, sweet earth and northern sky, forever blessed, since here did lie, and here with some limbs did run, beneath the moon, beneath the sun. Lúthien to Nuviel, more fair than mortal tongue can tell, the war to ruin fell, the world and word dissolved, and backward hurled, unmade into the old abyss. Yet were its making good for this, the dusk, the dawn, the earth, the sea, that Lúthien for a time should be. And he sang aloud, caring not what ear should overhear him, for he was desperate, and looked for no escape. But Lúthien heard his song, and she sang in answer, as she came through the woods unlooked for Huan, consenting once more to be her steed, had borne her swiftly hard upon Beren's trail. Long had he pondered in his heart what counsel he could devise for the lightening of the peril of these two whom he loved. He turned aside, therefore, at Sauron's isle, as they ran northward again, and he took thence the ghastly Wulfheim of Draugluin, and the Batfell of Thringwethil. She was the messenger of Sauron, and was wont to fly in vampire's form to Angband, and her great fingered wings were barmed at each joint's end with an iron claw. Clad in these dreadful garments, Huan and Lúthien ran through Tar Fuin, and all things fled before them. Beren, seeing their approach, was dismayed, and he wondered, for he had heard the voice of Tinuthiel, and he thought it was now a phantom for his ensnaring. But they halted and cast aside their disguise, and Lúthien ran towards him. Thus Beren and Lúthien met again between the desert and the wood. For a while he was silent and was glad, but after a space he drove once more to dissuade Lúthien from his journey. The reason why the region around Morgoth's lair is a desert is because the Daegor Bragolak, the Battle of Sudden Flame, burned away all the life around his keep, which had previously been under siege for many hundreds of years. "Thrice now I curse my oath to Thingol," he said, "and I would that he had slain me in Menegroth, rather than I should bring you under the shadow of Morgoth." Then, for the second time, Huan spoke with words, and he counseled Beren, saying, "From the shadow of death you can no longer save Lúthien, for by her love she is now subject to it. You can turn from your fate and lead her into exile, seeking peace in vain while your life lasts, but you will not deny your doom. Then either Lúthien, being forsaken, must assuredly die alone, or she must with you challenge the fate that lies before you. Hopeless, yet not certain. Further counsel I cannot give, nor may I go further on your road, but my heart forebodes what you find at the gate I shall myself see. All else is dark to me, yet it may be that our three paths lead back to Doriath, and we may meet before the end." Do you recall the first time that Huan deigned to speak? The legend, the gift upon him is that he only may speak thrice. Was it when Lúthien began her assault on Tol in Gorhoth, or was it when Lúthien was held captive inside Nargothrond by Celegorm? I'll review later. Then Beren perceived that Lúthien could not be divided from the doom that lay upon them both, and he sought no longer to dissuade her. By the counsel of Huan and the arts of Lúthien, he was arrayed now in the Haim of Draugluin, and she in the winged fell of Thringwethil. Beren became in all things like a werewolf to look upon, save that in his eyes there shone a spirit grim indeed, but clean, and horror was in his glance when he saw upon his flank a bat-like creature clinging with creased wings. Then howling under the moon, he leaped down the hill, and the bat wheeled and flitted above him. They passed through all perils, until they came with the dust of their long and weary road upon the drear dale that lay before the gate of Angband. Angband, the Iron Hell. Black chasms opened beside the road, whence forms as of writhing serpents issued. On either hand the cliffs stood as embattled walls, and upon them sat carrion fowl, crying with fell voices. Before them was the impregnable gate, an arch wide and dark at the foot of the mountain. Above it reared 1,000 feet of precipice. Their dismay took them, for the gate was a guard of whom no tidings had yet gone forth. Rumor of he knew not what designs abroad among the princes of the elves had come to Morgoth, and ever down the aisles of the forest was heard the baying of Huan, the great hound of war, whom long ago the Valar unleashed. Then Morgoth recalled the doom of Huan, and he chose one from among the whelps of the race of Draugluin, and he fed him with his own hand upon living flesh, and put power upon him. Swiftly the wolf grew, until he could creep into no den, but lay huge and hungry before the feet of Morgoth. There the fire and anguish of hell entered into him, and he became filled with a devouring spirit, tormented, terrible, and strong. Karkaroth, the Red Maw, he is named in the tales of those days, and Anfoglir, the Jaws of Thirst, and Morgoth set him to lie unsleeping before the doors of Angband, lest Huan come. Now Karkaroth espied them from afar, and he was filled with doubt, for news had long been brought to Angband that Draugluin was dead. Therefore, when they approached, he denied them entry, and bade them stand, and he drew near with menace, scenting something strange in the air about them. But suddenly, with some power, descended from divine race, possessed Lúthien, and casting back her foul raiment, she stood forth, small before the might of Karkaroth, but radiant and terrible. Lifting up her hand, she commanded him to sleep, saying, "O woe-begotten spirit, fall now into dark oblivion, and forget for a while the dreadful doom of life." And Karkaroth was felled, as though lightning had smitten him. Then Beren and Lúthien went through the gate, and down the labyrinthine stairs, and together wrought the greatest deed that has been dared by elves or men. For they came to the seat of Morgoth in his nethermost hall, that was upheld by horror, lit by fire, and filled with weapons of death and torment. There Beren slunk in wolf's form beneath his throne, but Lúthien was stripped of her disguise by the will of Morgoth, and he bent his gaze upon her. She was not daunted by his eyes, and she named her own name, and offered her service to sing before him, after the manner of a minstrel. Then, Morgoth, looking upon her beauty, conceived in his thought an evil lust, a design more dark than any that had come yet into his art, yet since he had fled from Valinor. Thus he was beguiled by his own malice, for he watched her, leaving her free for a while, and taking secret pleasure in his thought. Then suddenly she eluded his sight, and out of the shadows began a song of such surpassing loveliness and of such blinding power that he listened perforce, and a blindness came upon him, as his eyes roamed to and fro, seeking her, to and fro, to and fro, to and fro. All his court were cast down in slumber, and all the fires faded and were quenched. But the Silmarils in the crown on Morgoth's head blazed forth suddenly with a radiance of white flame, and the burden of that crown and all the Jews bowed down his head as though the world were set upon it, and, laden with a weight of care, of fear, and of desire that even the will of Morgoth could not support. Then Lúthien, catching up her winged robe, sprang into the air, and her voice came dropping down like rain into pools, profound and dark. She cast her cloak before his eyes, and set upon him a dream, dark as the outer void where once he walked alone. Suddenly he fell as a hill sliding in avalanche, and hurled like thunder from his throne, lay prone upon the floors of hell. The iron crown rolled echoing from his head, and all things were still. Beren, being the first vegan in all of these books, and a very experienced slayer of orcs, and that he was able to successfully jump onto Curufin's horse and best him in combat, and that he was willing to take an arrow in the chest for Lúthien, and I guess his musical accomplishment too, in his composition of the Song of Parting. Still, it does not compare to what Lúthien has been able to achieve here, winning the heart of Huan, who has been an indispensable ally in all of this, that she was able to, I suppose, after Huan beat him in physical combat, beat Sauron in a test of spellcasting, that she was able to escape from the imprisonment of Thingol on her own, and that she was able to cast freedom upon Sauron's tower, that she personally cast a spell upon, what's his name? The Karkaroth, the greatest werewolf, and that she was even able to cast sleep upon Morgoth, the evil god from which all the other evil spawns, as well as all of his court. Such incredible feats, heroic or not, are practically unheard of in the entirety of Middle-earth. This is the tale of Lúthien far, far, far more than it is the tale of Beren. Oh. Lucky him, I suppose. Some men are just blessed with really amazing women, despite what they're able to accomplish on their own. He tries his best, and that counts for a lot. And I think she sees that in him. As a dead beast, Beren lay upon the ground, But Lúthien, touching him with her hand, aroused him, and he cast aside the wolf hame. Then he drew forth the knife Angrist, and from the iron claws that held it, he cut a silmaril. I should also say, I believe I mentioned before, that the silmarils have a living light and a will of their own. They're very divine objects. As he closed it in his hand, the radiance welled through his living flesh, and his hand became as a shining lamp, but the jewel suffered his touch and hurt him not. It came then into Beren's mind that he would go beyond his vow and bear out of Angband all 3 of the jewels of Feanor, but such was not the doom of the Silmarils. The knife Angrist snapped, and a shard of the blade, flying, smote the cheek of Morgoth. He groaned and stirred, and all the host of Angband moved in sleep. Then terror fell upon Beren and Lúthien, and they fled, heedless and without disguise, desiring only to see the light once more. They were neither hindered nor pursued, but the gate was held against their going out, for Carcharoth had arisen from sleep, and now stood in wrath upon the threshold of Angband. Before they were aware of him, he saw them, and sprang upon them as they ran. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. A recounting of everything that's occurred with Morgoth. Before the beginning of time, he failed to, or I guess he was essentially used as an instrument unwillingly in the song of the world out of which it was born. And then, in the creation of the world, physically, after the song of the world, laid out the vision before all of the greater gods, he created too much trouble and was banished to darkness. Later on, he was put into unbreakable chains and set there for thousands of years, buried in the halls of, can't recall the name, Mandos. And after he was released, he captured the Silmarils, and they seared him and weakened him, but he refused to let go of them. Then he was forced to take some of the poison of Ungoliant, and that weakened him once again, as well as limiting his form, that he cannot shapeshift anymore. Then he was cut 7 times by the sword of Fingolfin, the second High King of the Noldor, after Finwë, the first High King of the Noldor. And before he could take in Fingolfin's body and defile it, his eye was scratched by the claws of the Lord of the Eagles, and now his cheek was cut by the great blade, great knife, Angrist. Time goes on, and he just becomes more and more withered. Although a lot of this time was, a lot of his weakening is not only due to these kinds of injuries inflicted upon him, but also that he continually lends out his power to create evils. whether that's the creation of dragons, or of orcs, or of laying of curses or evil smoke to spread poison throughout the land. Since he can no longer draw from the power of Eru. Now, back to where we were with Karkaroth springing upon them. Lúthien was spent, and she had not time nor strength to quell the wolf. But Beren strode forth before her, and in his right hand he held aloft the Silmaril. Karkaroth halted, and for a moment was afraid. Get you gone, and fly, cried Beren, for here is a fire that shall consume you, and all evil things. And he thrust the Silmaril before the eyes of the wolf. But Karkaroth looked upon that holy jewel, and was not daunted, and the devouring spirit within him awoke to sudden fire, and gaping he took suddenly the hand within his jaws, and bit it off at the wrist. Then swiftly and all his inwards were filled with a flame of anguish, and the Silmaril seared his accursed flesh. Howling, he fled before them, and the walls of the valley of the gate echoed with the clamor of his torment. So terrible did he become in his madness that all the creatures of Morgoth that abode in that valley, or upon any of the roads that led thither, fled far away, for he slew all living things that stood in his path, and burst from the north with ruin upon the world. Of all the terrors that ever came into Beleriand ere Angban's fall, the madness of Karkaroth was the most dreadful, for the power of the Silmaril was hidden within him. I'm quite curious what they have to say when other great evils escape. Because right now they're saying that Karkaroth did somehow become empowered by the Silmaril, although it causes him a huge deal of pain and is definitely slowly killing him. But also, really? He's the most terrible when this is the birthplace of dragons? I've heard the tale of Beren's distant cousin, Turin Turambar, and his battle against Glaurung the dragon. And Glaurung's a very nasty fellow. So to say that there are greater dragons than Glaurung, and Glaurung is a very nasty fellow, and still Karkaroth is the most terrible, most dreadful thing to ever escape. Well, I guess they're not saying most powerful thing to ever leave. They're only saying the most dreadful, and an accursed wolf with a spirit of devouring that's racked with pain and kills all in sight with madness. Okay, now there's an argument to be made that despite not being the most powerful, that is the most dreadful or frightening. Okay, the most fell thing, maybe. Although I think fell also does imply might. Now Beren lay in a swoon within the perilous gate, and death drew nigh him, for there was venom on the fangs of the wolf. Lúthien, with her lips, drew out the venom. That and she put forth her failing power to staunch the hideous wound. But behind her, in the depths of Angband, the rumor grew of great wrath aroused. The hosts of Morgoth were awakened. Thus the quest of the Silmaril was like to have ended in ruin and despair, but in that hour, above the wall of the valley, 3 mighty birds appeared, flying northward with wings swifter than the wind. Among all the birds and beasts, the wandering and need of Beren had been noised, and Huan himself had bidden all things watch, that they might bring him aid. High above the realm of Morgoth, Thorondor and his vassals soared, and seeing how now the madness of the wolf and Beren's fall, they came swiftly down, even as the powers of Angband were released from the toils of sleep. They lifted up Beren and Lúthien from the earth and bore them aloft into the clouds. Below them suddenly thunder rolled, lightnings leaped upward, and the mountains quaked. Fire and smoke belched forth from Thangorodrim, and flaming bolts were hurled far above, falling ruinous upon the lands, and the Noldor in Heathlam trembled. Heathlam are the lands of mist, which are just one mountain pass away from the desert of outside Angband. But Thorondor took his way far above the earth, seeking the high roads of heaven, where the sun day-long shines unveiled, and the moon walks amid the cloudless stars. Thus they passed swiftly over Dor Nufoglith and over Tar Nufuin, and came above the hidden valley of Tumladen. No cloud or mist lay there, and looking down, Lúthien saw far below, as a white light starting from a green jewel, the radiance of Gondolin, the fair where Turgon dwelt. But she wept, for she thought that Beren would surely die. He spoke no word, nor opened his eyes, and knew thereafter nothing of his flight. And at last the eagles set them down upon the borders of Doriath, and they were come to that same dell whence Beren had stolen in despair, and left Lúthien asleep. Things coming full circle again, now that we're half an hour past. Not a full circle. I mean, they're far, far away from the wrath of Morgoth, and there is a Silmaril on the loose for the taking. Things are going well, although Beren could survive this, and I think that you can tell he will. I'm sorry for the amount of editorializing that I've been doing here. The hidden valley of Tumladen. Yes. I've forgotten the name of it, but I do remember Gondolin. Turgon is a prince of the Noldor who is a very close friend of Finrod. They both received a vision from the god of the sea to go and create strongholds against Morgoth. Finrod, of course, the hewer of caves, made Nargothrond, while Turgon was led to this secret place, Gondolin. And within Gondolin, no, not even. There is nobody alive, not dwelling in Gondolin, who knows where it is? Except for the eagles. And even then, their perch is directly south. It's part of the same, Tumladen, the Hidden Valley, is within the same mountain range that Beren crossed over. In fact, part of the significance of Turin's life was the curse that Morgoth laid upon him, that all he would do would turn to doom. And the reason for this is that Turin's father would eventually enter into Gondolin and leave, and despite being captured by Morgoth, take the secret location of Gondolin to his grave. But that's for later. I don't think that Húrin, father of Turin, made it there yet. Although, other than somewhere in between Angband and Doriath, it could not be said that Lúthien has a good idea of where Gondolin and Tumladen is. Chrysagrim, it's in the next paragraph, that's the home of the eagles. There the eagles laid her at Beren's side and returned to the peaks of Chrysagrim then and their high eyries, but Huan came to her, and together they tended Beren, even as before when she healed him of the wound that Curufin gave to him. But this wound was fell and poisonous. Long Beren lay, and his spirit wandered upon the dark borders of death, knowing ever an anguish that pursued him from dream to dream to dream to dream to dream to dream. Then suddenly, when her hope was almost spent, he woke again and looked up, seeing leaves against the sky, and he heard beneath the leaves singing, soft and slow, beside him, Lúthien Tenuviel, and it was spring again. Therefore Beren was named Urkamian, which is the one-handed, and suffering was graven in his face. But at last he was drawn back to life by the love of Lúthien, and he arose, and together they walked in the woods once more. And they did not hasten from that place, for it seemed fair to them. Lúthien indeed was willing to wander in the wild without returning, forgetting house and people and all the glory of the elf kingdoms. And for a time Beren was content, but he could not for long forget his oath to return to Menegroth, nor would he withhold Lúthien from Thingol forever. For he held by the law of men, deeming it perilous to set at naught the will of the Father, save at the last need. And it seemed to him unfit that one so royal and fair as Lúthien should live always in the woods, as the rude hunters among men, without home or honor or the fair things which are the delight of the queens of Eldelay. Therefore, after a while he persuaded her, and their footsteps forsook the houseless lands, and he passed into Doriath once more, leading Lúthien home. So their doom willed it. I haven't been doing the page count this entire time. Let's say that this is page 18 now, yeah? To go a whole half hour without a page count. Shame on me. Well, I'm not sure if you can see. Lúthien certainly casting a spell on myself. Upon Doriath, evil days had fallen. Grief and silence had come upon all its people when Lúthien was lost. Long they had sought for her, in vain, in vain, in vain. And it is told that in that time Daeron the minstrel of Thingol strayed from the land and was seen no more. He it was that made music and dance and song of Lúthien before Beren came to Doriath, and he had loved her and set all his thought of her in his music. He became the greatest of all the minstrels east of the elves east of the sea, named even before Maglor, son of Feanor, also known as Maglor the Minstrel. But, seeking for Lúthien in despair, he wandered upon strange paths, and passing over the mountains, he came into east of Middle-earth, where for many ages he made lament beside the dark waters for Lúthien, daughter of Thingol, most beautiful of all living things. In that time Thingol turned to Melian, but now she withheld her counsel from him, saying that the doom that he devised must work to its appointed end, and that he must now wait upon that time. But Thingol learned that Lúthien had journeyed far from Doriath, for messages came secretly from Celegorm, as has been told, saying that Felagund was dead, and Beren was dead, but Lúthien was in Nargothrond, and that Celegorm would wed her. Then Thingol was wrathful, and he sent forth spies, thinking to make war upon Nargothrond. And thus he learned that Lúthien was again fled, and that Celeform and Curufin were driven from Nargothrond. Then his counsel was in doubt, for he had not the strength to assail the 7 sons of Feanor, but he sent messengers to Himring to summon their aid in seeking for Lúthien, since Celegorm had not sent to her the house of her father, nor had he kept her safely. But in the north of his realm, his messengers met with a peril sudden and unlooked for, the onslaught of Carcharoth, the wolf of Angband. In his madness he had run ravening from the north, passing at length over Tar Nafuin. Upon its eastern side he came down from the sources of Esgalduin, like a destroying fire, nothing hindering him, and the might of Melian upon the borders of the land stayed him not, for fate drove him, and the power of the Silmaril that he bore to his torment. Thus he burst into the inviolate woods of Doriath, and all fled away in fear. Alone of the messengers, Mablung, chief captain of the king, escaped, and he brought the dread tidings to Thingol. The 19th page, and the last one for tonight. Even in that dark hour, Beren and Lúthien returned, hastening from the west, and the news of their coming went before them like a sound of music borne by the wind into the dark houses where men sit sorrowful. They came at last to the gates of Menegroth, and a great host followed them. Then Beren laid Lúthien before the throne of Thingol, her father, and he looked in wonder upon Beren, whom he had thought dead, but he loved him not because of the woes that he brought upon Doriath. But Beren knelt before him and said, I return according to my word. I am now come to claim my own. And Thingol answered, What of your quest and of your vow? But Beren said, It is fulfilled. Even now a Silmaril is in my hand. Then Thingol said, Show it to me. And Beren put forth his left hand, slowly opening its fingers, but it was empty. Then he held up his right arm, and from that hour he named himself Camlost, the empty-handed. Then Thingol's mood was softened, and Beren sat before his throne upon the left, and Lúthien upon the right. And they told all the tale of the quest, while all there listened and were filled with amazement. And it seemed to Thingol that this man was unlike all other mortal men, and among the great in Arda, and the love of Lúthien a thing new and strange, and he perceived that their doom might not be withstood by any power of the world. Therefore at last he yielded his will, and Beren took the hand of Lúthien before the throne of her father. I'm going to read a little bit of the 19th page for a better cliffhanger. But now a shadow fell upon the joy of Doriath at the return of Lúthien the Fair, for learning the cause of the madness of Carcharoth, the people grew more afraid, perceiving that his danger was fraught and with dreadful power because of the holy jewel, and hardly a might overthrown. And Beren, hearing of the onslaught of the wolf, understood that his quest was not yet fulfilled. Wait, I said let's say we made it to the 18th page, then the 19th page, so this is actually the 20th page, my bad. 48 minutes have passed, and this was definitely a far less theatrical performance on my part. The balance of quantity with... I'm not going to bog down this memory with my apologetic nature. I'm thankful that you listen to me. I'm thankful that I get to share this story with you, despite my misgivings about the quality of my performance. I love you very much, and I am quite confident that the 5th and final installment of this tale will be the last. Until next that we hear from each other, my love, even if that be far away in the halls of Mandos.